Economic systems are always built upon moral presuppositions, and it would not be unreasonable to consider economics a moral science. So we assume that individual property rights are just and appropriate and, to a certain degree, self-evident. But at heart, they're simply assumptions. They cannot be justified over an alternative conception of property that is communal. We're looking here at capitalism versus socialism. In socialism, property is more holistic. It is recognized that it takes more than just one person to maintain the system of economic relations that sustain communal life, and therefore the whole community has a stake in what in the capitalist system is conceived to be the individual domain of a particular man or woman. And that's not more true in an abstract sense than the capitalist presupposition. They're both assumptions. Neither one is more intrinsically right. We're dealing with morality here. And if we're going to study morality scientifically, we have to study it inductively, and we have to look at the data as given. It's just what we observe, and then we build from that inductively a theoretic model. But that's not the way that most people throughout history have conceived of morality. They have conceived of it deductively. We take an axiom and then we spin out of it its practical implications. But that's not how morality actually works. Morality evolves with historical processes. So, now obviously I believe that there is some kind of transcendent morality that we strive to progress towards. But no one knows what it really is, so if we're going to be rational or reasonable, we have to acknowledge that these various moral presuppositions, from our perspective, our ignorant perspective, are equal in some fundamental sense. They're just assumptions. So, what about socialism? What about conceiving of things as the property of the whole community? The whole community is necessary to sustain the system of economic relations on which that capitalist conceived individual property relies, and the individual himself, of course. So why not think of these shared externalities as justification for literal shared stakes in communal goods? All goods, to some extent, are communal goods. A television you use in your house is also a source of heat that affects the whole community, a very minor one, but it's also, more than that, something that impacts the collective psyche. Because if you move into a neighborhood and have a huge 62-inch flat screen, super 3D, smell-o-vision television, then that is going to produce feelings of inadequacy in others. And the capitalist has to kind of just sweep that under the rug and say it doesn't matter. It's right and proper for that person to have the television they want. But other people's emotions are real. And we don't care about absolute levels of wealth. We care about relative levels of wealth. We care about where we fall in the social dominance hierarchy. So, the problem with socialism is that it's very difficult to conceive exactly how the whole, the community, is going to own a particular good. How does ownership apply to collectives? And how is production and exchange regulated by the whole community? That's why most socialist inspired communes fail. They don't understand that hierarchies are part of our psychology, and we don't get to just choose how the collective should emerge from some presupposed moral axiom of equality or something like that. Instead, we study how people actually get along, how societies actually get along, and then we build from the given case. So our given case in European society, before the capitalist system emerged, the mercantile and then capitalist system emerged, is feudalism. And that has deep roots because the Teutonic tradition involved a pledge of fealty to your warrior chief. And that pledge was to that man, not to some abstract collective, but to a man. And that was based on his personal ability and charisma. You had faith in him because our naturally evolved systems recognize whatever it is that justifies leadership very well. That's why you get an Adolf Hitler coming around, and supposing he's actualized himself, people flock to him. He sits down with someone for 30 minutes and they've completely changed their outlook and become subservient to him. How does that happen? Well, we don't have to understand how it happens. We just have to understand that it happens. And that's the basis of feudalism. Systems of fealty. Now, there are other historical processes that interfere with that in the feudal system, and it becomes less meritocratic and more hereditary. But that's not a wholly negative thing, because certain hereditary systems of entitlement are actually eugenic. The reason for that is that families become very concerned about who their children are marrying. And that alone, I think, would be a huge improvement on the modern dysgenic tendencies of free love. So, some combination of meritocracy and conceptions of familially inherited nobility are at work in the feudal system to good effect. But I think we have to abstract from the feudal system a bit more to arrive at a system of social property and rights and regulation that would actually work in the modern day. We have to look to the socialists who were actually writing about this stuff in the 1800s. Durkheim, Emil Durkheim, is the first socialist that I've read, because I had a stigma associated with the term socialism. Now, I guess that excludes Hitler, but Hitler was also a socialist, wasn't he? So, I think this is just an introduction to this concept that maybe we should think about socialism as not inherently bad, that maybe we can draw from the feudal tradition and European conceptions of fealty and hierarchy and aristocracy and this sort of thing, and maybe we can actually use a term that has cachet, that works today. Words are magic, they're spells, and if a word has charisma, then we should use it. And I think if you're arguing with a leftist and they identify as a socialist, then you can push socialism to a conclusion, a position that's more amenable to your values. Do you think it's harder to convert an international socialist to a white nationalist and only talk about the racial issue? Or do you think it's easier to convert them to a regional socialist or national socialist? That's much easier. So I think that that's just... I saw a post on Facebook, actually. when I was already thinking about this reevaluation of socialism, arguing for the same thing, that socialism should not be a dirty word, and I think it's worth considering. So, thank you for listening.